The black water swallowed everything, including light, including sound, including the part of her that still remembered how to be afraid. Chief Petty Officer Kiona Viteri counted in her head as the current dragged her through the darkness, lungs compressed, heartbeat deliberately slowed to 40 beats per minute. 200 meters. The river wanted to take her somewhere else, but she had studied this current for 6 days, and she knew exactly where it would spit her out. She had always known. The question everyone would ask later was how she ended up precisely at the Temple Island when the water itself seemed determined to pull her downstream. The answer was simple. Kiona Viteri did not fight the river. She had learned to think like it. But that moment was still 8 days away. Before we get into how she ended up in that water, drop a comment and let us know what state or country you're watching from. Maybe you live near rivers or coastlines yourself and understand how water can be both beautiful and deadly. 8 days earlier, Kiona stepped off the helicopter at Naval Support Activity Delta with a sea bag over her shoulder and orders she had requested 3 times before they finally came through. The Mekong Delta Riverine Unit was where careers went to stall out. Remote operations, limited support, and an enemy that knew these waters better than any American ever would. Most sailors avoided this assignment like a disease. Kiona had fought for it. The humidity hit her like a wall as the rotor wash faded. She had grown up in Hawaiian heat, but this was different. This air had weight. It pressed against her skin and carried the smell of river mud and diesel fuel and something green and rotting underneath it all. A petty officer second class stood waiting on the landing pad, looking like he had not slept in 2 days. Young, Nigerian heritage, if she had a guess. His uniform was sweat-soaked, and his eyes kept darting toward the tree line like he expected something to come out of it. Chief Viteri, he said, I am Petty Officer Okonkwo. They sent me to bring you to the operations center. She nodded and fell in a step beside him. How long have you been here, Okonkwo? 3 months, Chief. And how many times have you been in the water? He hesitated. Twice. Training exercises only. She heard everything he was not saying in that pause. This unit was not using its divers. That was going to change. The operations center was a low concrete building that looked like it had been built during a previous war and never updated since. Maps covered every wall. Red pins marked interdiction attempts. Blue pins marked failures. There were a lot more blue pins than red. A lieutenant commander stood at the central table, studying a tablet with the expression of a man who had been studying tablets and finding nothing useful for weeks. He looked up when Kiona entered, and she watched his eyes move from her face to her warfare insignia to her face again. Something flickered there. Not quite hostility, more like disappointment that his reinforcement was 5'4" and female. Chief Viteri, he said, I am Lieutenant Commander Harshaw. Welcome to the Delta. Thank you, sir. I have been reviewing the operational summaries. 13 interdiction attempts in the last 2 months. 2 successes. Harshaw's jaw tightened. The enemy knows these waters. Yes, sir. They do. She let that sit there without adding anything else. Harshaw waited for her to continue, to offer some criticism or suggestion that he could shoot down. She gave him nothing. Your file says you requested this assignment, he said finally. 3 times. Yes, sir. Care to explain why anyone would want to be here? Kiona looked at the map on the wall, at all those blue pins representing boats that came back empty or damaged or carrying wounded sailors. Because I think I can help, sir. Harshaw made a sound that was not quite a laugh. Everyone thinks that when they first arrive. He turned back to his tablet. Okonkwo will show you to your quarters. Equipment inspection at 0600 tomorrow. We will find somewhere useful to put you. She recognized a dismissal when she heard one. What she also recognized was a commander who had stopped believing he could win. That was more dangerous than any enemy hidden in the river. Okonkwo led her across the compound to a row of containerized housing units. The base was small, maybe 200 personnel total. She counted patrol boats at the dock. For operational for what she could see, the dive locker was a separate building near the water, and even from this distance, she could tell no one had used it recently. Dust on the door handles. No wet gear hanging outside. Chief, Okonkwo said quietly. I should tell you something. Go ahead. Lieutenant Commander Harshaw does not believe in diver operations. He thinks they are too slow, too risky. He calls them mermaid tactics. Kiona stopped walking. She looked at the young petty officer, at the exhaustion in his face and the hope he was trying to hide. What do you think, Okonkwo? I think 3 of my friends got hurt last week because we keep doing the same thing and expecting different results. He swallowed. I think I joined the Navy to be a diver, and I have been here 3 months and spent more time checking equipment than using it. She started walking again. 0500 tomorrow. Meet me at the dive locker. But Lieutenant Commander Harshaw said 0600 for equipment inspection. I know what he said. I also know that what happens before official hours is my business. She glanced back at him. You want to be a diver, Okonkwo? I will show you what that means. But you need to decide if you are ready to work harder than you have ever worked before. He straightened up. Something in his eyes shifted from tired to alert. Yes, Chief. That night Kiona could not sleep. She stood at the edge of the dock, watching the river move in the darkness. The water here was nothing like Hawaii. No clarity, no color, just brown and black and churning with secrets. But water was water. It followed rules. It had patterns. You just had to be patient enough to learn them. She watched for 3 hours. Sometime after 0200 she saw it. A flicker of light far upstream, where there should have been nothing. Then another, moving in a pattern that was not random. Not natural. Someone was signaling, and someone else was answering. Kiona smiled in the darkness. Now, she knew how they were doing it. She brought the information to Harshaw at 0700, stood in his office, and explained what she had seen. The light patterns, the timing, the way they corresponded with known smuggling windows. Someone on the river was communicating with someone on shore, and that was how the enemy always knew when patrols were coming. Harshaw listened with his arms crossed and his expression flat. So your theory, he said when she finished, is that we have been failing because of some lights you think you saw in the middle of the night. I do not think I saw them, sir. I saw them. And if we adjust our patrol routes to avoid the sight lines from those positions, we might actually catch them off guard for once. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Chief Viteri, you have been here less than 24 hours. I have been running this unit for 11 months. Do you really think you spotted something in one night that my entire team missed for nearly a year? She kept her voice level. I think fresh eyes sometimes see what familiar eyes have stopped looking for, sir. The smile disappeared. What I need from you, Chief, is not theories. What I need is someone to get our dive equipment operational. Half of it has not been serviced in 6 months because, frankly, we do not use it. So that will be your assignment. Equipment maintenance and inventory. Dismissed. Kiona felt the anger rise in her chest, but she kept it off her face. She had dealt with officers like Harshaw before, men who saw her size or her gender and decided she could not possibly know what she was talking about. The only answer was to prove them wrong so completely they could not ignore it. Yes, sir, she said, and she left. The dive locker became her world for the next 3 days. She inventoried every piece of equipment, serviced every regulator, tested every seal. Okonkwo joined her before dawn each morning, just like she had asked, and she started teaching him the things that mattered. How to control your breathing when your body screamed for air. How to move through water without creating turbulence. How to think 3 moves ahead, because underwater you did not get second chances. He was eager, clumsy at first, but eager. She saw herself in him. That desperate hunger to prove you belonged in a world that kept telling you that you did not. At night, when she should have been sleeping, she studied the river charts instead. Every tributary, every current pattern, every depth change. The water here was alive in ways most people never understood. It had moods. It had memory. If you learned to read it, you could predict where it would take you down to the meter. On the 3rd night, she fell asleep at her desk with the charts spread out beneath her head. That was when the dream came. She was 8 years old again. The undertow had her. She could see the surface shimmering above her, but no matter how hard she kicked, it kept getting farther away. Her lungs burned. Her vision narrowed. She reached up toward the light, and her fingers broke through the surface, but the rest of her would not follow. She opened her mouth to scream, and the water rushed in. She woke up gasping. Someone was knocking on her door. She checked the time. 03:15. Chief. It was Okonkwo's voice. Are you all right? I heard something. She took a breath, steadied herself, opened the door. He stood there in PT gear, looking worried. I was on my way to the head, and I heard you call out. Nightmare, she said. Old one. He hesitated like he wanted to ask, but knew it was not his place. She surprised herself by answering anyway. I almost drowned when I was 8. Riptide off Oahu. My grandfather pulled me out, but I was underwater for almost 2 minutes. She leaned against the door frame. For years, I could not even take a bath without panicking. Showers only. Pools were out of the question. But you became a diver. I became a diver because of it, not despite it. She met his eyes. Fear is just information, Okonkwo. It tells you where your limits are. And limits are just things you have not pushed past yet. He nodded slowly. Can I ask you something, Chief? Go ahead. Did you ever fail? She was quiet for a moment. The memory was still raw, even after all these years. First time I tried out for dive school, I washed out. Pool competency test. Instructor held me underwater, and I panicked. Could not control it. They sent me home. But you went back. 18 months later. Passed everything. Set 2 records that still stand. She smiled, but it was small and private. The only failure is the one you do not get up from. The next morning, she took Okonkwo into the river for a real training dive. The water was warm and murky and nothing like the clear pools where most divers learned. She showed him how to navigate by feel when visibility dropped to 0. How to use the current instead of fighting it. How to stay calm when the darkness pressed in from every side. When they surfaced, she saw a small group of sailors watching from the dock. Word was spreading. The new chief actually knew what she was doing. Harshaw was watching too. She could see him in the window of the operations center. His expression was unreadable, but she caught something in the set of his shoulders. Tension. Defensiveness. A man watching someone excel in an area where he had no expertise and no control. That afternoon, she submitted a formal recommendation through proper channels. A suggestion to shift patrol timing based on her observations about the signal lights. She knew Harshaw would probably bury it, but at least it would be on record. 2 days later, she heard that patrols were being adjusted. New timing, new routes, almost exactly what she had recommended. Harshaw announced it at the morning briefing like it was his own idea. He never mentioned her name, never acknowledged where the suggestion came from. The other sailors glanced at her, but she kept her face neutral. This was not the battle that mattered. The first patrol with the new timing caught a small smuggling boat. Nothing major, but it was the first interdiction success in 3 weeks. Harshaw smiled and accepted congratulations, and Kiona watched from the back of the room and said nothing. That night she was in the dive locker running Okonkwo through equipment checks when the radio crackled to life. All stations, this is Patrol 2. We are taking fire. Repeat, we are taking fire. Location is grid reference 774. The throat. Multiple hostiles. Request immediate backup. Kiona's blood went cold. She knew that stretch of river. Narrow channel. High banks on both sides. Perfect embouche terrain. If the enemy was there in force, it meant they had been watching. It meant they knew the new patrol routes, too. Harshaw's voice came over the radio. Patrol 2, hold position. Response team is launching now. All available personnel to the boats. She grabbed Okonkwo's arm. They are heading into a trap. What do you mean? The throat is a kill box. If the enemy is already set up there, and we send more boats and we're just giving them more targets. She started running toward the dock. Harshaw was about to get more people killed. The response boats were already loading when she arrived. She pushed through to Harshaw, who was shouting orders from the dock. So you cannot send them in blind. We need to know what we are facing first. We know what we are facing, Chief. Our people are under fire. He turned away from her. All boats launch now. She watched the boats roar away into the darkness, toward the sound of gunfire, toward whatever was waiting for them in the throat. And she knew with absolute certainty that this night was about to get much worse. Kiona commandeered a spot on the last response boat. Harshaw was too focused on the radio chatter to stop her, and by the time anyone thought to question her presence, They were already cutting through the dark water toward the sound of gunfire. The river at night was a different creature than the river by day. Shadows pooled along the banks like spilled ink. The jungle canopy blocked out the stars, and the only light came from the boats themselves, cutting pale wounds in the blackness. She counted the seconds between gunshots. Listened to the pattern. The enemy was not firing to kill. They were firing to pin down, to hold Patrol 2 in place. Waiting for something. Waiting for us, she thought. She pushed forward to where Harshaw stood at the helm of the lead boat. Sir, need to slow down. Our people are dying out there, Chief. Our people are bait, sir. Listen to the firing pattern. They are not trying to sink that boat. They're keeping in place until we arrive. Harshaw's jaw tightened. I'm not going to sit back while my sailors get shot at because you have a theory. It is not a theory. It is basic tactical analysis. If we go in there at full speed, we are giving them exactly what they want. He turned to face her, and in the dim light, she could see something beyond anger in his eyes. Fear. He was afraid because he knew she might be right, and he had no idea what to do about it. Stay out of my way, Chief. That is an order. The throat opened up ahead of them. A narrow channel, maybe 50 meters wide, with steep banks rising on both sides. Perfect embouche terrain. She could see the muzzle flashes now. Patrol 2 was pinned against the far bank, taking fire from somewhere in the tree line. Harshaw ordered the response boats to flank left and right. Standard suppression pattern. Exactly what any trained enemy would expect. The first RPG came out of nowhere. It screamed across the water and hit the boat to their right. The explosion turned night into day for one blinding instant. Kiona felt the heat wash over her face, and then she was moving on instinct alone. She grabbed the sailor nearest to her and pulled him down as automatic weapons fire raked their position from both banks. They had been wrong. The enemy was not just on one side. They were everywhere. The next 30 seconds were chaos. Another RPG. More gunfire. Someone screaming over the radio that they were taking on water. Harshaw was shouting orders, but his voice cracked with panic, and no one was listening anymore. Everyone was just trying to survive. Kiona saw the second boat capsize. It rolled hard to starboard and spilled sailors into the black water. Some of them were moving. Some were not. She did not think. She dove. The water swallowed her, and for one terrible instant, she was 8 years old again with the undertow dragging her down. But she was not 8 anymore. She pushed the fear aside and opened her eyes in the murky darkness and started swimming toward the shapes struggling in the water. She found the first sailor 10 meters out. Young kid, maybe 20, blood streaming from a gash on his forehead and his eyes glassy with shock. She grabbed him under the arms and started kicking toward the nearest bank. The current fought her. The weight of his body and her soaked uniform tried to drag her down. She kicked harder. Her feet found mud. She hauled him up onto the bank and checked his breathing. Shallow but steady. She did not have time to do more. Back into the water. Another sailor. This one was unconscious and heavier than the first. Her lungs burned as she dragged him to shore. The gunfire was starting to fade now. The enemy had done what they came to do. She went back a third time, found a body floating face down. She turned it over and saw dead eyes staring at nothing. Petty Officer Reno Salcedo, the boat crew chief she had seen at the dock that first day. Gone. She held him there for a moment in the dark water. Then she towed him to shore because no one got left behind, not even the dead. By the time the firing stopped completely, Kiona had pulled 4 sailors out of the river. 2 alive, 2 dead. Her arms felt like they were filled with sand, and her uniform was soaked with water and blood that was not hers. Harshaw stood on the bank staring at the wreckage. 2 boats destroyed, 1 damaged. 4 sailors wounded and 2 killed. The worst single engagement this unit had seen in its entire deployment. He turned and saw Kiona kneeling beside the bodies. Something flickered across his face. Guilt maybe, or shame. Then it was gone and the mask came back. Get those wounded to the medevac point, he said to no one in particular. And someone give me a damage report. The ride back to base was silent. Kiona sat with the wounded, holding pressure on a chest wound that kept bleeding through the bandages. Okonkwo was there too. He had been on patrol too. His hands were shaking, and his eyes had that hollow look she recognized from her own reflection years ago. "You did good," she told him quietly. "You survived. That matters." He did not answer. She did not expect him to. The medevac helicopter was waiting when they reached the dock. She helped load the wounded and watched the bird lift off into the darkness. Somewhere out there, families were about to get phone calls that would change their lives forever. Harshaw gathered the remaining personnel in the operations center. His voice was steady now, controlled. The voice of a man who had already decided how this story was going to be told. "We were hit by a coordinated ambush," he said. "Intelligence failed to identify enemy positions. Our response was appropriate given the information we had. I will be submitting a full report to Captain Nguyen in the morning." Kiona stood at the back of the room. She could feel eyes on her. Everyone knew she had tried to warn him. Everyone had heard her on that boat. She said nothing. There would be a time for truth. This was not it. Right now, there were sailors in shock and bodies being prepared for transport home in a unit that needed to hold together long enough to get through the night. But she saw Harshaw glance at her, just once, and in that glance, she saw a man who knew exactly what he had done and was already building the walls to protect himself from the consequences. The sun was coming up when the helicopter arrived. Not medevac this time. A different bird with different markings. Captain Nguyen stepped onto the dock. He was a small man with silver at his temples and eyes that looked like they had seen every kind of failure the military could produce. He surveyed the damage without expression. The burned hulls, the bloodstains on the concrete, the exhausted sailors who had not slept. Then he looked at Harshaw. "Lieutenant Commander, my office." "Now." He paused, and his gaze found Kiona across the dock. "Chief Viteri, you too." Kiona felt her stomach tighten. Whatever came next was going to determine whether she ever got the chance to do what she came here to do. Whether those sailors had died for nothing or whether their deaths might actually change something. She followed the captain toward the operations center. Behind her, she could hear Harshaw's footsteps, slower than hers, heavier. The footsteps of a man walking towards something he could not escape. Captain Nguyen's office was small and sparse. A desk, 2 chairs, a single photograph on the wall showing a younger version of himself standing in front of a patrol boat somewhere that looked like it might have been this same river 30 years ago. He had been here before. He understood what this place could do to people. He sat behind his desk and studied both of them for a long moment before speaking. "2 dead," he said. 4 wounded. 2 boats destroyed. One of the worst nights this unit has seen in 3 years of operations. He let that settle in the room like smoke. "Someone want to explain to me how we got here?" Harshaw spoke first. His voice was controlled, but Kiona could hear the strain underneath. "Sir, the enemy had intelligence we did not anticipate. They knew our response patterns. They set a trap, and we walked into it. I take full responsibility for the tactical decisions made in the field." Nguyen's expression did not change. "That is very noble, Lieutenant Commander. Now tell me why Chief Viteri was heard on multiple radio channels warning you that you were heading into an ambush." The silence stretched. Harshaw's hands tightened on the arms of his chair. Chief Viteri expressed concerns. He said carefully, "I evaluated those concerns and made a command decision based on the information available. Our people were under fire. Waiting was not an option." Nguyen turned to Kiona. "Chief, your assessment." She had thought about this moment all night. How to tell the truth without making it sound like an attack. How to be honest without burning a bridge she might still need. "Sir, I observed signal light patterns on my first night here that suggested the enemy had watchers positioned along the river. I reported those observations to Lieutenant Commander Harshaw. He adjusted patrol timing based on that information, which resulted in a successful interdiction." She paused. "Last night, I recognized similar patterns in the enemy's behavior. They were not trying to destroy Patrol 2. They were using it as bait to draw in our response force. I attempted to communicate this assessment, but the tactical situation was already in motion." "When not that, Splau." "So what you are telling me is that you identified the threat and were ignored." "I'm telling you that I had information that might have changed the outcome, sir. Whether it would have or not, I cannot say for certain. War is unpredictable." She felt Harshaw's eyes on her. surprised maybe that she was not throwing him under the bus. But Kiona had not come here to destroy anyone's career. She had come here to save lives. That meant working within the system, even when the system was broken. Nguyen leaned back in his chair. I have been reading your file, Chief Viteri. Combat Suimer Qualification. Advanced Reconnaissance Certification. 3 deployments with Special Operations Support Units. He tapped the folder on his desk. You requested this assignment. Tell me why. Because I believe I can make a difference here, sir. The enemy knows these waters, but they do not know what a trained diver can do in them. We have been fighting them on the surface where they have the advantage. I want to take the fight somewhere they're not expecting. Nguyen's eyebrows rose slightly. Go on. Sir, I have spent the last week mapping current patterns in the operational area. There is a stretch of river about 12 kilometers upstream where the current runs fast and unpredictable. Local fishermen avoid it. Our patrol boats avoid it, which means the enemy probably uses it as a safe corridor. She leaned forward. I believe their main weapons cache is somewhere along that stretch, hidden in one of the temple complexes on the river islands. If I am right, a solo underwater infiltration could locate and mark that cache for an airstrike. We could take out their entire supply line in one operation. Harshaw made a sound that was almost a laugh. Solo underwater infiltration. Through currents that have capsized boats. At night. In enemy territory. He shook his head. Captain, this is not a tactical proposal. This is a suicide mission dressed up in diving gear. Nguyen held up a hand. Let her finish. Kiona kept her voice steady. Sir, the current in that stretch runs at approximately 4 knots with predictable variation based on tidal patterns. I have calculated the drift trajectories. If I enter the water at the right point and the right time, the current will carry me exactly where I need to go. I will surface at the target location having traveled 300 meters without making a sound or leaving a trace. You will surface, Harshaw said, or you will drown, and we will be explaining to Pacific Fleet how we lost a chief petty officer on an unauthorized cowboy operation. It is not unauthorized if the captain approves it, Kiona said. And it is not cowboy if it is based on 6 days of hydrological analysis and 15 years of combat diving experience. The room went quiet. Nguyen studied her face like he was looking for something. Doubt maybe. Fear. Some sign that she did not really believe what she was saying. He did not find it. I need to think about this, he said finally. Both of you are dismissed. Chief Viteri, I want a written proposal on my desk by 1800. Every detail. Entry points. Extraction plans. Contingencies. If you're going to convince me this is not suicide, I need to see the math. Yes, sir. She stood and walked out without looking at Harshaw. She could feel his anger radiating off him like heat from a fire. This was not over between them. Not even close. Later that afternoon, she was in the dive locker working on her proposal when she heard voices outside. Harshaw's voice. And Okonkwo's. She moved to the window and listened. You were on that boat last night, Harshaw was saying. You saw what happened. You think Chief Viteri's plan is going to work any better than mine did. Okonkwo's response was quiet but firm. Sir, Chief Viteri pulled 2 sailors out of that river while the rest of us were still trying to figure out which way was up. She has forgotten more about water operations than most of us will ever learn. Careful petty officer. Loyalty is admirable, but blind loyalty will get you killed. It is not blind, sir. I have been training with her every morning. I have seen what she can do. If she says she can navigate that current, I believe her. Silence. Then Harshaw's voice dropped lower. Too low for Kiona to hear clearly. But she caught the tone. Threatening. The sound of a man marking someone as an enemy. When Harshaw walked away, Okonkwo stood there for a long moment. Then he turned and saw Kiona watching through the window. You did not have to do that, she said when he came inside. Yes, I did, Chief. He met her eyes. Those people who died last night. That is on him. Everyone knows it, even if no one is saying it. Someone needs to start saying it. What you need to do is keep your head down and let me handle Harshaw. With respect, Chief, I am done keeping my head down. He straightened up. What do you need me to do for the proposal? She looked at him for a long moment. This young sailor who had been terrified in the water just days ago. Who had watched friends die and come out the other side not broken, but angry. Angry enough to fight. She handed him the river charts. Start calculating tidal variations for the next 72 hours. I need to know exactly when that current will be running where I need it to run. They worked until the sun went down. At 1800 on the dot, Kiona delivered her proposal to Captain Nguyen's office. 12 pages. Every detail, every contingency, every reason why this would work and why the risk was worth taking. Then she went back to her quarters and waited. The knock came at 2200. A junior sailor with a message. Captain Nguyen wants to see you, Chief. Alone. She walked across the compound in the darkness. The river was invisible, but she could hear it. That constant rushing whisper that never stopped. Calling her maybe, or warning her. Nguyen was waiting in his office. The proposal was open on his desk. He looked up when she entered, and she tried to read his expression, but there was nothing there. Just the flat professional mask of a man about to deliver news that would change everything one way or another. Close the door, Chief. We need to talk about your future with this unit. Nguyen did not make her wait. He gestured to the chair across from his desk, and she sat down with her hands folded in her lap, like she was back in boot camp waiting to be told whether she had passed or failed. Your proposal is impressive, he said. The math is solid. The tactical analysis is sound. I believe you could do exactly what you say you can do. She felt hope rise in her chest. Then she saw his face, and the hope died. But I cannot approve it. Sir, Chief Viteri, you are one of the most qualified combat swimmers I have ever had under my command. That is exactly why I cannot risk losing you on a solo operation with no backup and no margin for error. He leaned forward. Do you understand what happens if you die out there? Not just to this unit, to the program. To every woman trying to prove she belongs in special operations. One dead female sailor on a mission that looks like a stunt, and everything you have worked for becomes ammunition for people who want to keep women out of combat roles. Kiona felt the words hit her like physical blows. She had spent her entire career trying to be judged on her abilities, not her gender. And now her gender was the reason those abilities did not matter. So I'm being told no because I am a woman. You're being told no because the risk-reward calculation does not work. Nguyen's voice was firm but not unkind. I am sorry, Chief. I know this is not what you wanted to hear. But my job is to win this fight without losing more people than I have to. Right now, that means conventional operations only. She stood up. Her legs felt numb. Permission to be dismissed, sir. Granted. She walked out of that office and kept walking. Past the operations center. Past the barracks. Past the dock where the burned hulls of the destroyed boats were still being cleared. She walked until she reached the far edge of the compound, where a concrete barrier overlooked the river. She stood there in the darkness and let herself feel it. The anger, the frustration, the crushing weight of being told that everything she knew how to do was worthless because the people in charge were too afraid to let her do it. Her satellite phone buzzed. She almost ignored it, but then she saw the caller ID. Senior Chief Wilhelmina Teague, her mentor from dive school. The woman who had pushed her harder than anyone else and believed in her when no one else did. She answered. Heard you were having a rough deployment. Teague's voice was gravelly and warm. The same voice that had talked Kiona through her darkest moments 15 years ago. Word travels fast. Small community. Teague paused. You want to tell me what happened, or do you want me to guess? Kiona told her. All of it. The ambush. The proposal. The rejection. The feeling that she had come all this way just to be sidelined while people died. Teague listened without interrupting. When Kiona finished, there was silence on the line for a long moment. You remember what I told you the day you came back to dive school? After you washed out the first time? Kiona closed her eyes. You said the ocean does not care how many times you fail. It only cares whether you are ready when the wave comes. That is right. And what did I tell you about being ready? You said being ready means being patient. It means staying sharp even when no one is watching. It means trusting that the moment will come and being prepared to move when it does. Teague's voice softened. The moment will come, Kiona. It always does. Your job right now is not to force it. Your job is to be so ready that when it arrives, there is no question you are the only one who can handle it. And if it does not come, then you will have spent your time making everyone around you better. That is not nothing. Teague paused. How was that young petty officer you mentioned? The one who wants to be a diver. Okonkwo. He is struggling. The ambush hit him hard. Then that is your mission right now. Help him get through it. Build him into someone who can do what you do. Plant seeds, Chief. Even if you never see them grow. The call ended, and Kiona stood there watching the river. Teague was right. She knew Teague was right. But knowing something and feeling it were two different things. She found Okonkwo behind the dive locker. He was sitting on an equipment crate staring at nothing. His hands were not shaking anymore, but something in his eyes had gone still. Too still. She sat down next to him without speaking. Petty Officer Chun died, he said after a while. The one with the chest wound. They tried to save him on the medevac, but there was too much internal bleeding. Kiona remembered Chun. Young kid, maybe 22. She had held pressure on his wound the whole ride back to base. I keep thinking I should have done something different, Okonkwo said. Moved faster. Seen the ambush coming. Something. There was nothing you could have done. He looked at her. How do you know? Because I have been where you are. More than once. She stared out at the water. After my first deployment, I spent 6 months convinced that if I had just been a little faster or a little smarter, my dive partner would still be alive. I went over every second of that mission 1,000 times looking for the moment where I could have changed everything. What happened? IED in the water. We were clearing a harbor approach. He was 10 meters ahead of me. I heard the blast, and by the time I reached him, there was nothing left to save. She paused. I told myself it was my fault because that was easier than accepting the truth. What truth? That sometimes people die and there is no reason. No listen. No way you could have stopped it. Sometimes the universe just takes people and the only thing you can do is keep going. Okonkwo was quiet for a long time. Then he said, does it get easier? No, but you get stronger. Strong enough to carry it without letting it crush you. The memorial service for Chun and Salcedo was held the next morning. The whole unit gathered on the dock. Flags at half-staff. A chaplain speaking words that were meant to comfort but just sounded hollow. Harshaw gave a speech. He talked about sacrifice and duty and the price of freedom. He called the dead sailors heroes who gave everything in service to their country. He never mentioned that they might still be alive if he had listened to a warning. Kiona stood at the back and watched the faces around her. Grief, anger, exhaustion. A unit that was slowly losing faith in the man leading it. After the service, she overheard 2 petty officers talking near the equipment shed. Third ambush in 2 months, one of them said. Every time we adjust, they adjust faster. It is like they know what we're going to do before we do it. Maybe they do. Maybe someone is telling them. Kiona filed that away. A leak. It made sense. The enemy was too well informed too consistently for it to be coincidence. But who? And how? She was still thinking about it that evening when the operations center erupted with activity. Runners sprinting between buildings. Officers shouting into radios. Something big was happening. She found Nguyen in the middle of it, all staring at a printout, like it contained the secrets of the universe. Captain, what is going on? He looked up at her. His expression had changed. The careful caution from a night before was gone, replaced by something sharper, something that looked almost like hope. Intelligence intercept, he said. High confidence. There is a major weapons shipment moving through the Delta in 72 hours. Enough firepower to supply their operations for the next year. He held up the printout, and we know exactly where it's going. Kiona's heart started beating faster. Where? Nguyen met her eyes. A temple complex on a river island, 12 kilometers upstream, right in the middle of the stretch you identified in your proposal. She understood immediately. This was it. The moment Teague had told her to wait for. Sir, that shipment, that location. There is only one way to hit it without them seeing us coming. When notets flau. I know, Chief. I know. The briefing room was packed. Every officer on base crowded around the central table where Nguyen had spread out reconnaissance photos and intelligence reports. Kiona stood near the back, watching Harshaw's face as the pieces came together. We have been asking the wrong question, Nguyen said. We kept wondering how the enemy knew our patrol schedules. We assumed there was a leak, a traitor, someone feeding them information from inside our operations. He tapped one of the photographs, a grainy image showing a small fishing village near the mouth of the river. There is no leak. There does not need to be. They have watchers positioned at every major access point to the river system. Fishermen, farmers, people who look like civilians but report every boat movement within minutes. By the time our patrols reach operational depth, the enemy already knows we are coming. Kiona felt the revelation settle into place. She had seen it that first night. The signal lights, the coordination, but she had not understood the full scope until now. Nguyen continued. This is why conventional interdiction has failed. This is why adjusting patrol timing only works once before they adapt. As long as we are using surface vessels, we are visible, predictable, compromised before we even begin. He looked up and found Kiona in the crowd, which is why I am authorizing Chief Vitteri's infiltration proposal. The room went silent. Kiona saw Harshaw's jaw tighten. His hands curled into fists at his sides. Sir, Harshaw said, with respect, we discussed the risks of this operation. Nothing has changed. Everything has changed, Lieutenant Commander. We now have confirmed intelligence on a target worth hitting and a 72-hour window to hit it. Nguyen's voice was steel. Chief Vitteri's plan is the only approach that gets us inside their perimeter without being detected. She goes in underwater. She marks the cache. Air assets handle the rest. And if she fails, then we're no worse off than we are now. Nguyen turned to face Kiona directly. Chief, I'm giving you what you asked for. Do not make me regret it. I will not, sir. The briefing broke up, but Harshaw did not leave. He waited until the room cleared, and then he moved to block Kiona's path to the door. You think you have won something? He said quietly. His voice was controlled, but she could hear the fury underneath. You have not won anything. You have convinced a desperate commander to approve a mission that is going to get you killed. And when it does, I will make sure everyone knows whose fault it was. Kiona met his eyes without flinching. Is that a threat, Lieutenant Commander? It is a promise. He stepped closer. You fail out there, and I will personally ensure that your career is over. No transfer. No quiet reassignment. I will make sure every fitness report, every evaluation, every record reflects that you died because you were reckless and arrogant and refused to listen to your commanding officer. She let him finish. Let the silence stretch between them. Then she spoke in a voice so calm it barely sounded human. Lieutenant Commander Harshaw, in approximately 36 hours, I'm going to enter that river and do something you cannot imagine doing yourself. I am going to succeed because I have spent my entire life preparing for moments exactly like this. And when I surface with that target marked, you're going to stand there and watch while everything you believe about what people like me can do burns down around you. She paused. So here's my promise to you. Stay out of my water. She stepped around him and walked out. The next 30 hours were a blur of preparation. Kiona checked every piece of equipment 3 times, tested every seal, verified every calculation. The current would be running at 4.2 knots at her entry time. She would drift 312 meters in approximately 74 seconds. Her target window for surfacing was 8 meters. Anything outside that, and she would be visible from the temple complex. 8 meters. In a river she had never swum. In complete darkness, with enemies waiting to kill her if she made a single mistake. She could do this. She had to believe she could do this. Okonkwo found her in the dive locker the night before the mission. He was carrying his own gear bag. I am coming with you, he said. No, you're not. Chief, I have been thinking about this. You need a backup swimmer for extraction. Someone waiting at the secondary point in case something goes wrong. I can do that. You have been diving for 3 months. This is not a training exercise. He set his jaw. I know what this is. I also know that you pulled 2 people out of that river when the rest of us were drowning. You taught me how to breathe underwater, how to trust the current instead of fighting it. He met her eyes. Let me put that training to use. She studied his face, saw the fear there, but also something else. Determination. The same determination she had felt 15 years ago when she walked back into dive school after washing out. If I say yes, you follow my orders exactly. No improvisación. No heroics. You wait at the extraction point, and if I do not surface within the window, you leave. Understood. Understood, Chief. She handed him a set of charts. Then start memorizing these. You need to know that river as well as I do. They worked through the night. Sometime around 0300, Okonkwo asked the question she had been expecting. Chief, can I ask you something personal? Go ahead. That story you told me about almost drowning when you were a kid. How do you do it? How do you go back into the water over and over knowing what it almost did to you? Kiona set down the charts. She looked at this young sailor who reminded her so much of herself and decided he deserved the truth. When I was 8 years old, I got caught in a riptide off Waikiki. My grandfather was teaching me to free dive. I thought I knew what I was doing. I did not. The current pulled me under and held me there for almost 2 minutes. I remember seeing the surface getting farther away. I remember my lungs burning. I remember thinking that I was going to die and there was nothing I could do about it. She paused. The memory was still sharp even after all these years. My grandfather pulled me out. I do not remember that part. I woke up on the beach with him doing CPR, and I could not breathe right for 3 days afterward. For years after that, I had nightmares. I cannot swim, cannot even look at the ocean without panicking. So what changed? My grandfather. He told me that the water was not my enemy. It was just water. The fear was the enemy. And the only way to beat fear was to walk straight into it until it stopped controlling me. She met Okonkwo's eyes. I did not become a diver despite almost drowning. I became a diver because of it. Every time I go into the water, I am proving that the worst moment of my life does not get to define me, that I'm stronger than the thing that almost killed me. Okonkwo was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. I think I understand, Chief. Good, because in about 12 hours, we are both going to walk into our fear, and we're going to come out the other side. The sun set over the delta in streaks of orange and red. Kiona stood at the insertion point, watching the water turn black as the light faded. Okonkwo was beside her, already suited up and ready. Gwen had come to see them off. He shook her hand and looked at her with something that might have been respect. Good hunting, Chief. Thank you, sir. Harshaw was there too, watching from a distance. He did not say anything. He did not have to. His expression said everything. Kiona turned away from him, turned toward the water. The river moved past in endless darkness, carrying secrets and danger and the opportunity she had been waiting for her entire life. She pulled down her mask, checked her regulator one final time, looked at Okonkwo, see you on the other side. Then she stepped off the bank and let the current take her. The black water swallowed everything, including light, including sound, including the part of her that still remembered how to be afraid. Kiona let the current take her. For 0.2 knots of river pushing her through darkness, so complete she could not tell which way was up. Her heartbeat slowed to 40 beats per minute, a trick her grandfather had taught her 30 years ago on a reef off Oahu. The slower your heart, the longer your air. The calmer your mind, the farther you could go. She counted in her head. 1, 2, 3. Each number a meter traveled. Each second a choice to trust the math instead of the fear clawing at the edges of her consciousness. The water here was nothing like home. No warmth, no clarity, no light filtering down from tropical sun. This was river water thick with silt and secrets and the weight of 1,000 years of human violence. It pressed against her mask, filled her ears with a rushing whisper that sounded almost like voices. 23, 24, 25. Her grandfather's voice came to her from somewhere deep in memory. You cannot fight the ocean, Kiona. You have to become part of it. Let it move through you, and you will move through it. She had been 6 years old the first time he took her diving. Too young, probably. Her mother had objected, but grandfather had insisted. The sea is in her blood, he had said. She needs to meet it before she forgets. 51, 52, 53. The current shifted. She felt it in her bones before her body registered the change. A subtle rotation in the water. The river bending around something she could not see. This was the tricky part. The place where the math got complicated and instinct had to take over. She adjusted her body position by millimeters, angled her shoulders, let the new current catch her and carry her toward the eastern bank. 78, 79, 80. The fear was still there. It never went away completely. 26 years of training had not eliminated it. 26 years had only taught her how to use it. Fear was information. Fear told you where the danger was. The trick was listening to it without letting it control you. 115, 116, 117. Her lungs were starting to burn. Not badly. Not yet. But the pressure was building. The ancient animal part of her brain screaming that she needed air, needed to surface, needed to breathe right now. She ignored it. She had trained herself to ignore it. The human body could hold its breath far longer than the human mind believed. The panic was a liar. It always had been. 189, 190, 191. She thought about the day she went back to dive school. 18 months after washing out. 18 months of pool training and breath holds and forcing herself into the water over and over until the panic stopped winning. The instructor who had failed her the first time was still there. He had looked at her like she was crazy. You know what is going to happen, he had said. You know I'm going to hold you under until you break. She had looked him in the eye. Then I guess you better hold on tight. 244, 245, 246. The water was getting shallower. She could feel the temperature change as the river bottom rose toward her. The current was slowing too, depositing her exactly where the math said it would. 288, 289, 290. Almost there. The numbers in her head matched the map she had memorized. The current would release her in approximately 10 more meters. She would surface in the shadow of a collapsed dock on the eastern shore of the Temple Island. If she was right, if she was wrong, she would surface in open water with enemy guns pointed at her head. 300, 301, 302. The current let her go. She drifted upward slowly. No vabes, no splashing, just a gradual rise through water that was finally still. Her head broke the surface without a sound, and she took her first breath in over 90 seconds. She was exactly where she had planned to be. The collapsed dock was 3 meters to her left, ancient wood rotting in the tropical humidity. Beyond it, the temple complex rose from the jungle like bones from flesh. Stone walls covered in vines. Pagoda roofs silhouetted against stars. And everywhere she looked there were lights. More lights than the intelligence had predicted. She counted as she floated motionless in the shadow of the dock. 6, 10, 15. At least 20 sources of illumination spread across the complex. Lanterns, flashlights, the orange glow of cigarettes. This was not a small operation. This was an army. She reached for the waterproof camera strapped to her chest and began documenting. Every light source, every visible guard position, every path between buildings. The strike planners would need all of it, but she also needed to find the cache, the weapons. Without confirmed coordinates, the airstrike would be shooting blind. She scanned the complex looking for the most likely location. Storage buildings, underground bunkers, anywhere you could hide enough weapons to supply a year of operations. There, a larger structure near the center of the island. 2 guards at the door, another 2 patrolling the perimeter. Heavy wooden doors that looked newer than the rest of the architecture. That was where they were keeping the cargo. She needed to get closer. The water route was too exposed. Guards were positioned along the shoreline at regular intervals. But the jungle between the dock and the storage building was dark, dense. If she moved carefully, she might be able to approach undetected. She pulled herself onto the muddy bank inch by inch. No sound, no sudden movements. Just slow, steady progress until she was lying flat in the underbrush with the temple complex spread out before her. The smell hit her first. Weapons, oil, ammunition, that distinctive metallic scent that every combat veteran recognized. Whatever was in that building, it was exactly what the intelligence had promised. She started moving through the jungle, crawling on her belly, stopping every few meters to listen. The guards were talking to each other in low voices, laughing about something. Relaxed. They were not expecting visitors. 50 meters to the storage building. Then 40. Then 30. She was close enough now to see details. The locks on the doors. The crates stacked inside through a gap in the wooden slats. Enough firepower to kill hundreds of people. She raised her camera, started documenting coordinates, and then she heard footsteps. coming directly toward her position. She froze, pressed herself into the mud, stopped breathing. The footsteps got closer. Closer. A guard walking the perimeter, his boots crunching on dead leaves not 5 meters from where she lay hidden. He stopped. She could hear him breathing, could smell the tobacco on his clothes. He was looking at the jungle, looking at the shadows where she was hiding, looking for something his instincts told him was there. One wrong sound and she was dead. The guard stood there for what felt like an eternity. 5 meters away, close enough that Kiona could see the sweat stains on his collar. Close enough that one glance downward would end everything. She did not breathe, did not blink, became part of the mud and the shadows and the rotting vegetation beneath her. The guard muttered something under his breath, adjusted himself. Then he turned and continued his patrol route away from her position. She waited until his footsteps faded completely before allowing herself to exhale. Too close. This whole operation was balanced on a knife edge, and she was running out of time. She resumed her crawl toward the storage building. 15 meters. 10. 5. The gap in the wooden slats was just ahead. She needed to document what was inside and get exact coordinates for the strike team. What she saw through that gap made her blood run cold. Crates. Hundreds of them. Stacked floor to ceiling in neat rows that stretched back into darkness. She recognized the markings. RPGs, heavy machine guns, anti-aircraft missiles. Enough firepower to turn this entire region into a war zone for years. But that was not what stopped her heart. It was the activity inside. Men loading crates onto hand trucks, wheeling them toward a back entrance. A boat engine idling somewhere nearby. They were moving the shipment. Tonight. Not in 72 hours. Right now. She checked her watch. The airstrike was scheduled for 0430. 6 hours from now. By then, this building would be empty. The weapons would be scattered across a dozen different locations. The entire mission would be worthless. She had to make a decision. Option 1. Abort the infiltration. Get back to the water. Radio the situation and hope command could accelerate the strike timeline. But that meant surfacing in hostile territory, broadcasting on frequencies the enemy might be monitoring. And even if she got through, there was no guarantee the strike assets could reposition in time. Option 2. Improvise. She carried 3 small demo charges. Standard issue for combat swimmers. Enough explosive power to disable a boat engine or breach a door. Not enough to destroy this cache, but maybe enough to delay them. The hand trucks were the key. Without them, the loading process would slow to a crawl. And if something went wrong with the boats, she started moving again, not toward the water this time, toward the back of the building where the loading operation was centered. This was insane. She knew it was insane. Solo infiltration was one thing. Active sabotage in a compound full of armed hostiles was something else entirely. Harshaw's voice echoed in her head. Suicide mission dressed up in diving gear. Maybe he was right. Maybe this was how she died. But if she did nothing, those weapons would disappear into the jungle and people would die anyway. Sailors like Chun and Salcedo. Civilians caught in crossfires. Children who never asked to be born into a war zone. She kept moving. The back of the building was chaos. Guards shouting orders. Workers struggling with heavy crates. 2 boats tied up at a makeshift dock with their engines running. Nobody was watching the perimeter because everybody was focused on the loading. She spotted her first target. A fuel bladder sitting unguarded near the boats. Rupture that, and the boats were not going anywhere. She crept closer, used the shadows, used the noise of the operation to cover her movement. Her dive knife was in her hand now, the small demo charges ready in her vest. 20 meters from the fuel bladder, a radio crackled to life somewhere nearby. She froze. Music poured out of the speaker. American pop music. Some song about dancing and heartbreak that had been playing in every club in San Diego the last time she was stateside. The absurdity of it almost made her laugh. Here she was crawling through mud in enemy territory about to commit an act of sabotage that would probably get her killed, and somewhere a guard was listening to the same song that drunk college kids were grinding to in bars back home. War was strange. It never stopped being strange. She reached the fuel bladder, pulled out her knife. One quick slash would be enough. But she had to time it right. Too early, and they would have time to find another fuel source. Too late, and the boats would already be loaded. She waited, watched the loading progress, counted crates. When they were about halfway done, she made her move. The knife went through the bladder like it was paper. Fuel spilled out in a dark flood that spread across the mud and soaked into the ground. The smell was overwhelming. Someone would notice soon, but by then it would be too late to save enough fuel for both boats. She was already moving toward her second target. The hand trucks were lined up near a supply tent. If she could disable the wheels, they would have to carry the crates by hand. That would buy hours. She placed the first demo charge under the axle of the nearest truck. Set the timer for 15 minutes. Moved to the second truck. Third truck. Each charge placed with surgical precision. Somewhere behind her, someone shouted. She did not understand the words, but she understood the tone. Alarm. Discovery. She looked back. A guard was standing over the ruptured fuel bladder, staring at the spreading pool with an expression of disbelief. He had not seen her. Not yet. But in about 3 seconds, he was going to start looking for whoever did this. She abandoned stealth and ran. The jungle swallowed her as shouts erupted behind her. Flashlight beams swept through the darkness. She could hear boots pounding on packed earth, dogs barking somewhere in the distance. They did not know where she was. They just knew someone was here. She had maybe 10 minutes before those demo charges went off. 10 minutes to reach the water. 10 minutes to disappear before this island turned into a hornet nest. She sprinted toward the collapsed dock where she had first surfaced. Branches whipped her face. Roots tried to trip her. The sounds of pursuit grew louder behind her. 8 minutes. She could see the water now, black and welcoming. Safety was 50 meters away, and then the alarm went off. Not a shout this time. An actual alarm. A siren wailing across the compound. Lights snapping on everywhere. The whole island coming awake like a single angry organism. She did not know if they had found her trail. Did not know if someone had spotted her running through the jungle. Did not know anything except that she had about 30 seconds to reach that water before every gun on this island was pointed in her direction. She ran harder than she had ever run in her life. The dock was right there. The water was right there. Behind her, the first explosion ripped through the night. Then the second. Then the third. The demo charges detonating in sequence. Screams and chaos erupting from the loading area. Kiona hit the water in a dive that carried her 3 meters below the surface. The current grabbed her immediately, pulled her away from the island, away from the lights and the sirens and the men who wanted to kill her. She swam with the current this time, let it carry her downstream toward the extraction point, toward Okonkwo, toward survival. Behind her, the temple complex burned. The river embraced her like an old friend. Kiona swam with the current now instead of against it. Every stroke carried her farther from the burning temple complex, farther from the men with guns who were screaming into the darkness, trying to find the ghost who had destroyed their operation. But she was not safe yet. Behind her, she heard boat engines roaring to life. Not the cargo boats she had sabotaged. Other boats. Patrolkraft. They were coming after her. She dove deeper. The water here was murky enough that even with spotlights, they would not see her beneath the surface. But she had to stay down, had to control her breathing, had to trust the current to carry her faster than those engines could push. Her lungs were already burning from the sprint through the jungle. She had not had time to properly oxygenate before hitting the water. Every second underwater now was borrowed time. She counted strokes, counted meters. The extraction point was 800 meters downstream. Okonkwo would be waiting there in the shadows with a raft and a radio. If she could reach him, they could call in the strike and disappear before the enemy knew where they had gone. If she could reach him, the boat engines were getting louder. Searchlights swept across the water above her head. She could see the beams cutting through the murk like pale fingers reaching for her. She went deeper still. The pressure built in her ears. Her chest felt like it was being crushed. The animal part of her brain was screaming for air. She ignored it. She had trained for this, had spent years pushing her body past the point where normal people blacked out. The panic was a liar. It always had been. 400 meters. Halfway there. A searchlight passed directly overhead. close enough that she could see the individual particles of silt illuminated in its beam. She held perfectly still and let the current carry her through the light and back into darkness. The boat moved on, looking for a swimmer on the surface, not expecting anyone to be this deep for this long. 500 meters. Her vision was starting to narrow, gray spots at the edges, the first sign of oxygen deprivation. She thought about her grandfather, about the day he had taught her to hold her breath for 3 minutes. "You are not fighting the water," he had said. "You are not fighting your body. You're only fighting your fear. And fear can be beaten." 600 meters. The gray spots were growing. Her limbs felt heavy. Every instinct screamed at her to surface. Not yet. Not yet. She could hear the boat engines fading now, moving upstream, moving away from her. They had lost her trail. 700 meters. Her lungs were on fire. Her heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her teeth. Almost there. Almost there. She angled upward, slowly, carefully, let herself rise toward the surface 1 agonizing meter at a time. The water grew lighter, warmer. She could see stars through the rippling surface above her head. Her face broke through, and she gasped. The air tasted sweeter than anything she had ever breathed. She floated there for a moment, letting oxygen flood back into her starving cells. A hand grabbed her arm. She almost struck out before she recognized the face. Okonkwo, his eyes wide with relief and fear. "Chief, I thought you were dead." He pulled her toward the concealed raft. The charges went off, and then the alarm started, and I thought, "I am fine." She hauled herself onto the raft. Her whole body was shaking from exertion and cold and the aftermath of adrenaline. "Radio. Now." He handed her the handset. She keyed the frequency they had established for the operation. "Home base, this is Diver 1. Target confirmed. Cache located at grid reference 479er261. Enemy is attempting to relocate cargo. Recommend immediate strike." I say again, recommend immediate strike. Static. Then Nguyen's voice came through. "Diver 1, this is home base. Copy your transmission. Confirm you're clear of target area." "Affirmative, home base. I'm at extraction point. Target is marked and ready." "Outstanding work, Chief. Strike package is inbound. ETA, 30 minutes. Return to base immediately." She allowed herself 1 moment of satisfaction, 1 moment to feel the weight of what she had accomplished. Then another voice came over the radio, and the satisfaction curdled into something colder. "Home base, this is Lieutenant Commander Harshaw. I want it on record that this operation was conducted under my command authority. Chief Viteri was acting on my direct orders throughout." Kiona's jaw tightened. Even now, even after everything, he was trying to take credit. Okonkwo looked at her with disgust in his eyes. "Is he serious?" She shook her head. "It does not matter. The mission is what matters. Let him have his words. We have the results." But it did matter. It mattered because men like Harshaw never stopped. They took credit for success and assigned blame for failure, and the people who actually did the work were invisible to them. It mattered because Chun and Salcedo were dead and Harshaw was still playing politics. She pushed it down. There would be time for that later. "Start the motor," she told Okonkwo. "We need to be gone before those patrol boats circle back." He moved to the outboard engine. She scanned the river with a night vision scope they had brought for exactly this purpose. The patrol boats were still upstream. The temple complex was chaos. They had a clear path home. And then she saw it, a shape in the water, 200 meters closer to the island than it should be, moving against the current. She adjusted the scope. Focused. It was a swimmer. Someone in the water heading toward the temple complex instead of away from it. For one confused moment, she thought it was an enemy combatant. But the stroke pattern was wrong. Too clean. Too trained. That was not how local fighters swam. That was how Navy divers swam. Her blood turned to ice. "Okonkwo," she said, "where's your backup gear?" He looked up from the motor. "What?" "Your backup gear. The secondary dive equipment. Where is it?" His face went pale. "I left it at the forward observation point, in case you needed it for the return swim." The forward observation point, 200 meters closer to the island. Exactly where that swimmer was heading. Understanding crashed over her like a wave. Okonkwo had not stayed at the extraction point. At some point during the chaos, he had moved forward, tried to get closer in case she needed help. And now he was back here, which meant, who else knew about the forward position? She demanded. Nobody. Just me and... He stopped. His eyes went wide. Just me and the equipment manifest, which goes through the operations center, which goes through Harshaw. The swimmer in the water was not Okonkwo. It was someone else. Someone who had been sent to the forward position. Someone who did not know that position was now directly in the strike path. She grabbed the radio. Home base, this is Diver 1. Check your personnel. Who else is in the water tonight? Silence. Then Nguyen's voice tight with sudden alarm. Diver 1, we show all personnel accounted for at base. Why? Because I have a swimmer on scope heading toward the target area, and your strike package is 30 minutes out. She looked at Okonkwo, looked at the river, looked at the shape in the water that was swimming directly toward the place where bombs were about to fall. Someone was going to die if she did not move right now. Kiona was back in the water before Okonkwo could stop her. The current fought her this time. She was swimming upstream, now, against 4 knots of river that wanted to push her back towards safety. Every stroke burned. Her muscles were already exhausted from the infiltration and the escape. Her lungs still ached from the oxygen deprivation. None of that mattered. Someone was going to die if she did not reach them in time. She swam harder than she had ever swum in her life. The technique her grandfather had taught her. The efficiency she had learned in dive school. The pure, stubborn refusal to quit that had carried her through every impossible moment of her career. All of it focused on one goal. Close the distance. Through her mask, she could see the swimmer ahead, still moving toward the island. Whoever it was, they had no idea what was coming. No idea that in less than 20 minutes, this stretch of river was going to become a kill zone. She pushed harder, gained 5 meters, 10, 15. The radio crackled in her waterproof earpiece. Nguyen's voice tight with urgency. Diver 1, we have identified the swimmer. Petty Officer Reyes from Communications Division. He was sent to recover equipment from the forward position. He does not have comms. Reyes. She knew him. Young kid from Texas. Good sailor. Terrible swimmer. What the hell was he doing in the water? She did not have time to wonder. She just had to reach him. 50 meters. 40. 30. She could see him clearly now, struggling against the current. His stroke was sloppy and desperate. He was already exhausted, and he was not even halfway to the forward position. She closed the final distance in a burst of speed that left her seeing stars. Her hand grabbed his ankle, and he thrashed in panic before she surfaced beside him. Reyes. It is Chief Viteri. Stop fighting. His eyes were wild with fear. Chief. What? I was sent to get the equipment. Lieutenant Commander Harshaw said. Of course Harshaw had sent him. Sent an inexperienced swimmer into hostile waters in the middle of an active operation. Sent him to a position that was about to be obliterated. Later she would deal with that. Right now she had to move. Listen to me very carefully. There is an airstrike inbound to this location. We have approximately 15 minutes to get clear. You need to swim with me right now. Do exactly what I do. Understood. He nodded. The fear in his eyes shifted from panic to focus. Yes, Chief. She turned downstream and started swimming. The current was with her now. The same force that had tried to stop her moments ago was pushing her towards safety. She let it carry her, and Reyes followed in her wake, using her body to break the resistance. 10 minutes. They needed to cover 400 meters in 10 minutes. With a tired swimmer who was barely keeping his head above water, she adjusted her pace. Fast enough to make distance. Slow enough that Reyes could follow. It was a balance she had learned training junior divers. Push too hard, and they panicked. Go too slow, and you both died. 8 minutes. 200 meters covered. Reyes was flagging, his strokes getting weaker. She dropped back beside him, grabbed his vest, started towing him. The extra weight was brutal. Her shoulder screamed. Her legs burned. But she did not let go. She would not let go. 6 minutes. 150 meters to the extraction point. She could see the raft ahead. Okonkwo, standing at the edge, watching them come. Behind her she heard it. The distant thunder of aircraft engines. The strike package was early. She swam faster, dragged Reyes through the water like he weighed nothing. The adrenaline surge gave her strength she did not know she had. For minutes, 100 meters, the aircraft sound grew louder. She could feel the vibration in the water now. The river itself trembling in anticipation of what was coming. 50 meters. Okonkwo was in the water reaching for them. She shoved Reyes toward him. Get him on the raft. Now, what about you? I am right behind you. Go. Okonkwo grabbed Reyes and hauled him toward the raft. Kiona turned to look upstream. The temple island was lit up like daylight. Fires still burning from her sabotage. Figures running in chaos, trying to save what could not be saved. Then the sky opened up. The first bomb hit the storage building dead center. The explosion was so bright it burned through her closed eyelids. The shockwave rolled across the water and slammed into her like a physical force. She dove, went deep as the world above her turned to fire. More explosions, one after another. The entire cache detonating in a chain reaction that lit up the night for miles. She could feel the pressure waves, even underwater. Could hear the roar of destruction through the river itself. When she surfaced, the temple complex was gone. Nothing left but flames and smoke and the distant screams of men who had thought they were untouchable. She swam to the raft and let Okonkwo pull her aboard. For a long moment, she just lay there staring up at the stars while her body tried to remember how to breathe. We did it, Okonkwo said. His voice was shaking. Chief, we actually did it. She sat up slowly, looked at Reyes, who was coughing water and shivering with shock, looked at the burning island, looked at the river that had tried to kill her and had ended up being her greatest weapon. Yeah, she said. We did. The return to base was quiet. Reyes fell asleep from exhaustion. Okonkwo piloted the raft in silence. Kiona watched the sky lighten toward dawn and let herself feel something she had not felt in a long time. Pride. Not the arrogant kind, the quiet kind, the kind that came from knowing you had done something that mattered. The dock was crowded when they arrived. Word had spread. Everyone knew what had happened. She could see it in their faces as she climbed out of the raft. Respect, awe, the look people got when they realized they were standing next to someone who had done the impossible. Nguyen was waiting for her. He did not say anything, just shook her hand and held it for a long moment. Outstanding work, Chief. Thank you, sir. Harshaw was there too, standing apart from the others. His face was unreadable, but she could see the calculation behind his eyes. Already figuring out how to spin this. She heard him talking to one of the junior officers later that morning. The operation was conducted under my oversight. I made the call to approve the infiltration plan. Chief Viteri executed well, but the strategic vision came from command. She did not respond, did not confront him. There was no point. Men like Harshaw would always find ways to claim credit they did not deserve. But she noticed that the other sailors were not listening to him anymore. They were watching her. They knew who had gone into that water. They knew who had come back. That afternoon, a helicopter landed on the base. Different markings than the usual supply runs. Nguyen found her in the dive locker, and his expression was strange. Chief, my office. Now. He paused. There is someone here to see you. Who? Rear Admiral Catherine Westbrook. Pacific Fleet Special Operations. She specifically requested to speak with you and Lieutenant Commander Harshaw. Kiona felt something shift in her chest. Admirals did not fly to remote bases for routine debriefs. She followed Nguyen across the compound. Whatever was waiting in that office, it was going to change everything. She could feel it the same way. She could feel currents in the water. Something was coming, and this time she was ready for it. Rear Admiral Catherine Westbrook was not what Kiona expected. She was small, barely 5 feet tall with silver hair cropped close to her skull, and eyes that looked like they had seen every kind of war the world had to offer. She sat behind Nguyen's desk like she owned it, like she owned every room she walked into. Kiona stood at attention beside Harshaw. She could feel the tension radiating off him. The careful control of a man who knew he was in danger but had not figured out how much. At ease, Westbrook said, "Both of you." They relaxed into parade rest. Westbrook studied them for a long moment without speaking. "I have read Captain Nguyen's preliminary report," she said finally. I have also read Lieutenant Commander Harshaw's supplemental report. She paused. They tell very different stories. Harshaw spoke first. Admiral, if I may, the operation was conducted under my command authority. While Chief Viteri performed admirably in the field, the strategic framework. Stop talking. The words were quiet, but they cut through the room like a blade. Harshaw's mouth snapped shut. Westbrook leaned forward. Lieutenant Commander, I did not fly 600 miles to hear you take credit for something you try to prevent. I have statements from Captain Nguyen, from Petty Officer Okonkwo, from Petty Officer Reyes, who you sent into a strike zone without communications equipment. She let that sink in. Would you like to explain why an inexperienced swimmer was dispatched to a forward position during an active combat operation? He was sent to recover equipment, Admiral. Standard procedure. Standard procedure. Westbrook's voice was ice. Standard procedure would have been to wait until the operation was complete. Standard procedure would have been to send a qualified diver. Standard procedure would have been to ensure he had comms. She shook her head. What you did was either criminally incompetent or deliberately designed to compromise the mission. I have not decided which. Harshaw said nothing. There was nothing he could say. Westbrook turned to Kiona. Chief Viteri, I have also read your service record. All of it. Kiona felt her stomach tighten. She knew what was in that record. The failure. The washout. The 18 months of shame before she found the courage to try again. You failed your initial BUD/S qualification, Westbrook said. Pool competency. Panic response during the drown-proofing exercise. Yes, Admiral. And then you came back. 18 months later. Passed every test. Set records that still stand. She tilted her head. Why? Kiona considered the question. She had answered it before. For Okonkwo. For herself in the dark hours when doubt crept in. But this was different. This was an admiral asking. This mattered. Because the water was not my enemy, Admiral. The fear was. And I refused to let fear decide what I was capable of. Westbrook nodded slowly. A small smile crossed her face. That is not failure, Chief. That is the definition of a warrior. Anyone can succeed when things come easy. The ones who matter are the ones who fail and get back up. Who face the thing that broke them and break it instead. She stood and walked to the window. Outside, the river moved past in its endless journey to the sea. This operation destroyed the largest weapons cache we have identified in 3 years of conflict in this region. Conservative estimates suggest it will set enemy operations back by 18 months minimum. She turned back to face them. That happened because Chief Viteri saw something no one else saw. Proposed a plan no one else would have attempted, and executed it flawlessly under conditions that would have broken most operators. She looked at Harshaw. It did not happen because of you, Lieutenant Commander. It happened despite you. The silence stretched. Kiona watched Harshaw's face cycle through emotions. Anger. Shame. The desperate calculation of man looking for an escape that did not exist. You're being reassigned, Westbrook said. Effective immediately. There's a supply depot in Guam that needs a new logistics officer. I am told the position offers excellent opportunities for someone who wants to rebuild their career far from combat operations. It was not a court-martial. It was not a public disgrace. It was something worse in its own way. Exile. Irrelevance. The slow death of ambition. Harshaw straightened. Yes, Admiral. Dismissed Lieutenant Commander. He left without looking at Kiona. The door closed behind him, and suddenly the room felt lighter. Like a pressure she had not realized she was carrying had finally released. Westbrook sat back down. Now, Chief Viteri, let's talk about your future. She pulled a folder from her briefcase. I am authorized to offer you a position at the Naval Special Warfare Advanced Training Command. Instructeur cadre. You would be training the next generation of combat swimmers, teaching them what you know. Kiona felt the weight of the offer. It was everything she had worked toward. Recognition, respect, a chance to shape the future of her community. It was also a desk, a classroom, safety. Admiral, I am honored, truly, but I would like to decline. For now. Westbrook raised an eyebrow. May I ask why? Kiona thought about Okonkwo, about the fear in his eyes that first week and the determination that had replaced it. about Chun and Salcedo and all the sailors who would never go home. There's still work to do here, Admiral. People I started training who are not finished yet. She paused. I did not come to this unit to punch a ticket. I came because I thought I could make a difference. That has not changed. Westbrook studied her for a long moment. Then she smiled. The offer will remain open, Chief. When you are ready. Thank you, Admiral. After Westbrook left, Kiona found Gwyn waiting outside his own office. He had a letter in his hand. This came while you were in the briefing, he said. From stateside. She took it. The return address was unfamiliar. A town in Ohio she had never heard of. She opened it and read, Dear Chief Viteri and the sailors of Naval Support Activity Delta. My name is Margaret Chun. David was my son. I am writing to thank you for bringing him home to us. I know he died doing what he believed in. I know he was surrounded by people who cared about him. That means more than I can say. David always wrote about how much he was learning from the experienced sailors in his unit, how they pushed him to be better, how they never gave up on him even when he struggled. I do not know if you were one of those sailors, but I suspect you were. Thank you for that. Thank you for giving my son something to believe in. Sincerely, Margaret Chun. Kiona read it twice. Then she folded it carefully and put it in her pocket. She walked to the edge of the dock, the same spot where she had stood that first night. The same river moving past in the darkness. Okonkwo found her there. What are you looking at, Chief? She smiled. Same thing I was looking at the first night I got here. He stood beside her, watching the water, watching the shadows. What do you see? She thought about the signal lights, about the patterns in the darkness that everyone else had missed, about all the work still left to do. Possibility, she said. I see possibility. 3 weeks later, Kiona stood at the front of the briefing room. The faces looking back at her were different than they had been a month ago. Less tired, less defeated. These were sailors who had started believing again, believing that what they did mattered, believing that they could win. She pointed to the map on the wall. Intelligence indicates a new supply route opening up through the southern tributaries. Enemy activity has increased significantly in this sector over the past week. She traced the river system with her finger. We're going to interdict it, but we're going to do it smart. She outlined the plan. Underwater reconnaissance first. Pattern analysis. Understanding the enemy's movements before engaging. No more charging blind into ambush corridors. No more giving them what they expected. When she finished, Okonkwo raised his hand. Chief, what about the current patterns in the southern stretch? I have been studying the charts, and there is a convergence point near Grid 7 that could work for covert insertion. Kiona smiled. He had been studying, learning, becoming the diver she had seen hiding inside him that first week. Good catch, Petty Officer. Walk us through what you found. She stepped aside and let him take the front of the room. Watched him explain the current dynamics with confidence he had not possessed a month ago. Watched the other sailors listen. Really listen. Not because he outranked them, but because he knew what he was talking about. This was what mattered. Not medals. Not recognition. This. Passing on what you knew so it lived beyond you. After the briefing, Gwyn caught her in the hallway. Admiral Westbrook called. He said, She wanted me to tell you the instructor position is still open. No pressure. Just a reminder. Kiona nodded. I appreciate that, sir. She does not give up easily. Neither do I. Gwyn smiled. That is exactly what she said you would say. He paused. For what it is worth, Chief. I am glad you're staying. This unit is better because you are here. Thank you, sir. That evening her satellite phone buzzed. She checked the caller ID and felt warmth spread through her chest. Senior Chief Teague. She answered. So, Teague's gravelly voice came through. I heard you blew up half an island and saved a drowning sailor and got a rear admiral to personally reassign your commanding officer. Slow week. Kiona laughed. Something like that. I also heard you turn down the instructor position. For now, there's still work to do here. Teague was quiet for a moment. You remember what I told you about planting seeds. Even if I never see them grow. Sounds like you're seeing some of them grow right now. That young petty officer you mentioned, the one who wanted to be a diver. Okonkwo. He ran his first solo briefing today. Kiona looked out the window at the river. He's going to be better than me someday. That is the whole point, Chief. That is always the whole point. Teague paused. I am proud of you, Kiona. I hope you know that. The words hit harder than she expected. Teague was not someone who said things like that casually. "I know, Senior Chief. Thank you. For everything. Go swim. I can hear in your voice that you need it." The call ended, and Kiona sat with the silence for a moment. Then she grabbed her gear and headed for the water. Dawn was just breaking when she reached the river. Pink and gold lights spreading across the sky. The water was calm, glass smooth, nothing like the churning darkness she had fought through weeks ago. She suited up slowly, checked her equipment by habit, even though she was not going anywhere dangerous. This was not a mission. This was something else, something she needed. She waded into the river until the water reached her chest, took 3 deep breaths, felt her heartbeat slow. Then she dove. The water closed over her head, and everything went quiet. No radio chatter, no mission objectives, no enemy waiting in the darkness. Just her and the river and the current that had tried so hard to break her. She swam, not against the current this time, not with it either, just through it, moving because movement was what she was built for, what she had chosen over and over again every time fear told her to stop. The fear was still there. It never went away completely. Every time she went under, she felt the echo of that 8-year-old girl drowning off Waikiki. Every time she held her breath, she felt the panic waiting at the edges. But she went under anyway. She held her breath anyway, because that was who she was. Not someone without fear. Someone who refused to let fear win. She surfaced exactly where she had planned to surface. A small inlet 200 meters from where she had started. The math was easy. The current was predictable. She had done this calculation 1,000 times. She floated on her back and watched the sky brighten. Somewhere on the base, sailors were waking up. Okonkwo was probably already in the dive locker running equipment checks. Nguyen was probably reading intelligence reports and planning the next operation. The war was not over. It would not be over for a long time. There would be more missions, more danger, more moments when the water tried to take her and she had to choose whether to fight or surrender. But right now, in this moment, she was exactly where she was supposed to be. She thought about Chun and Salcedo, about the families who would never see them again, about the weight of carrying their memory forward. She thought about her grandfather, about the day he had taken a terrified little girl into the ocean and told her the water was not her enemy. She thought about all the divers who would come after her, the ones Okonkwo would train, the ones they would train, an unbroken chain of people who chose to face their fear instead of running from it. The current dragged her 300 meters. She surfaced exactly where she planned, because she always did. Kiona swam back to shore as the sun climbed higher. The day was beginning. There was work to do, new intelligence, new operations, new sailors who needed to learn that the impossible was just something no one had tried hard enough yet. She belonged here, in this water, doing this work, and she was just getting started. If this story moved you, we would love to hear from you. Drop a comment and tell us your favorite part, or if you connected with Kiona's journey. Maybe you have faced your own fears and refused to let them win. Or maybe you know someone who showed this kind of quiet courage. Share your story with us. And if you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing so you do not miss the next one. Thank you for watching.